I might actually see it.
You can actually see it.
Green. Get on. Submissions that want to make, and there's some more questions.
Good evening, everybody. We might now come to order and make a start to the council meeting this evening. So if I can ask people to take their seats, please. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to today's council meeting. To begin the meeting, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the land in which we are gathered here this evening, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and welcome all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who may have joined us here this evening. Item 1 in the agenda is membership. Membership is as listed in the agenda. Item 2, apologies. There are apologies from Councillor Lawrence, who is on an approved leave of absence. Item 3 is disclosures of conflicts of interest. Are there any disclosures? Councillor Messina.
I have a conflict of, yes, through you, Madam Mayor, I have a conflict for item number 8.1 this evening, aged care reforms.
And can you state the nature of your...
Through you, Madam Mayor, I hereby declare that my current employer provides home care packages CHSP in-home respite and social support services to the Italian community. I also acknowledge that Council currently is not a direct competitor of such services. However, briefings and information sessions are currently being undertaken, and I hereby declare that a conflict will arise if Council and my current employer were in a competitive market. I hereby declare that I have a conflict.
Thank you, Councillor Messina. I would also like to declare a conflict this evening for item 8.4, which is the Mayor Montreal visit. I have an indirect interest in this matter that is of a conflicting duty. Okay, item 4, confirmation of the minutes of council meetings from the 30th of April 2018. So that's moved by Councillor Messina and seconded by Councillor Greco. All those in favour? That motion is carried. Item 5 is question and submission time. So I'll move first to the questions that have been submitted before the meeting. The first question is from Brian Fairman from Preston South, who has indicated that he won't be attending this evening, so I'll read the question. This question relates to the need to provide lighting in Florence Adams Reserve. 72 members of the community petitioned Darebin Council in January 2016 to provide lighting in Adams Reserve along with a barbecue and water fountain. We have the barbecue, however, this is still not operational, and fortunately we have a water fountain. However, on the substantive concern regarding lighting, we remain in the dark. The question is, could Council please inform the community about their intention to provide adequate lighting in Adams Reserve and when the barbecue will be turned on? We have communicated to councillors, old and new, many times regarding our concerns, and we will await a positive response to this matter. So in response to the community petition, Council allocated a sum of $50,000 in the 2016-17 capital budget to address the items nominated in the petition. The budget sum allocated was not enough to install lighting in the reserve, but was sufficient to undertake the balance of the items requested. The consultation was undertaken in February 2017, and the new barbecue area, tree planting, new water fountain with dog bowl, playground upgrades, and a general tidy-up were completed. Since its installation, council officers have been working with the Power Authority Gemina to have the barbecue turned on. Council has completed all the necessary documentation. However, despite regular calls to Gemina, they have not yet connected it. Council has now escalated the matter to the Energy Ombudsman for resolution. We are aware of the problem and will continue to work to get it rectified. Regarding the lighting, there are no plans to install lighting in Florence Adams Reserve at this time. Currently, Council does not light minor neighbourhood parks like Florence Adams unless there is a competition sporting field, a public transport node, or the park is a high priority in the principal pedestrian network. The next question is from Anne Laver from Northcote. If you'd like to come forward to the lectern and read your question.
Councillors. Question 1. My first question relates to aged care services. And I'm asking, will the Darebin Council please consider voting for the council staff to conduct further consultation with the community rather than employing external consultants? The reason why I'm against external consultants is because the Darebin Council staff know the residents well and are better placed to conduct proper consultation. This is what they are paid good money to do. The consultants who are paid even a greater amount of money are given a brief with a suggested result, and they do not necessarily produce a better result. Two results there. Further, the cost is a waste of money and clearly indicated from tonight's presentation on the report presented on the progress of the council plan. This report, which cost $5,000, was merely a poorly cut and paste document sourced from council internal documents. So if this is an indication of what consultants provide, I think it's really poor. I'm additionally concerned that the outcome of yet another long-term review is merely a measure to stave off the community concern that it is already been decided that services will cease to be provided after 2020. It seems that the aged care services will follow the route of the disability services support, which was ceased in about 2016. Can you please answer that question?
Yes. So the question that you asked in relation to the proposed age-friendly Darebin review and the consultation, that is a decision for the council to make this evening, so I can't comment on the decision of whether we use staff or external consultants. The decision before council tonight will decide that. If the councillors, the council, as I've said at the previous meeting, has not made a decision. So I guess just in relation to the comments about whether it will follow the disability services, the route of the disability services, we have not made a decision, and we'll make a decision on the process this evening about how we will get to make a decision in terms of gathering the evidence and consulting with the community. In relation to the Council Action Plan Progress Report in the agenda papers that you referred to tonight, thank you for that feedback. That is on silent. Thank you for that feedback. The report is graphically designed so that it is readable and legible for a broader audience. And I guess just to clarify, the $5,000 isn't just for the cost of the production of tonight's report, it's for the production of all of the quarterly reports over the year. So it's not just one report.
Well, I could cut and paste better than that, I think. Question 2, regarding the Preston Market. Will the council please vote to release the heritage report for the Preston Market? As the Darebin Council is a partner along with the VPA in the review, I consider that withholding this report indicates that they are not fulfilling their responsibilities in allowing the review to be undertaken properly. In addition, as a member of the reference group, I feel I am unable to properly fulfil my role, which is to provide advice, input and suggestions if the documents are not available for me to read and analyse.
So council has not yet made a decision on the heritage advice, nor made the decision about the next steps, which includes releasing the study. And I want to assure you that there is enough time for council to make sure the advice is ready before we consider next steps. I note that the community reference group's process is just at the beginning, so I think your first meeting is this week.
Yes.
And it is intended to explore the constraints and opportunities of the site through a series of workshops. So the meetings will include expert presentations on a broad range of topics and focused discussion with technical experts. And I'm sure that heritage will also be covered in those conversations as well.
Well, I think it's unreasonable if it's not going to be available on by
there is
Wednesday.
no sorry, Ms. Lever, I'll have to stop you there. You can ask a question, I can respond to the question.
Okay.
There has been no decision taken by this council about the next steps and whether to release the report. The next question is from Craig Walters from Preston. We'll just get you the right... We just need the microphone because we are streaming online, so people online won't be able to hear you without the microphone.
Thank you. For the last 2 years, I've been here about this time requesting that homemakers of beer be once again permitted to showcase their wares at the Food and Wine Festival, as they did for the first 10 years of the festival when it was the Beer and Wine Festival. In 2018, beer makers are once again allowed to take part. That's good, but have been banned from being able to offer samples of their product and discuss it with patrons of the event. Winemakers are allowed to. Why not beer makers? And if there are few entrants in the beers competition this year, you'll know why. Let's focus on prizes and more on community engagement.
Thanks for your question. And in response to your feedback, staff have been reorganising the Meet the Makers showcase to include beer tasting. Sorry. Yep. Did you? I'll start that again. In response to your feedback, staff have been reorganising the Meet the Makers showcase to include beer tasting. So local beer makers, along with the winemakers, will be able to share their products with festival goers at the Northcote Town Hall on Saturday. These beers will also be profiled at the Homemade Food and Wine Festival Awards on Friday night, Friday the 25th of May. In subsequent years, we hope that we can increase the participation in the beer category, and hopefully this change will help facilitate that.
So the form I was filling in said beer people not allowed.
So in response to your feedback, we're reorganising the event to allow it to happen, and we'll get some more information to you in response to your question. The next question is from Manny Spiteri from Surrey Hills. If you'd like to come forward to the lectern.
Mayor, councillors, CEO. I refer to item 14.1. I note that under the Local Government Act, section 89, specifically, I'll refer to 1. Unless subsection 2 applies, any meeting of the council or special committee must be open to members of the public. Then, quite conveniently, second last page of the agenda, you refer to section 89.2. Council special may resolve at that meeting to be closed. Members of the public, if the meeting is discuss any of the following, you only put E, but when you refer to E, it says proposed development. If all development applications are in and there are no new public planning and/or development applications, and as a representative of the advocate of the Preston market, any new proposal will have an effect on people who come, the traders of the Preston market. Thirdly, also, as a member of the community reference group, I'm concerned about the proposed development. What is it? Because if we're going to be discussing via the VPA, and we're going to be gagged because we're not allowed to talk to anyone, no media, and that will be raised as a question with regards to my constituents, then why is this 14.1 being closed? Why hasn't it been, this proposed development, not been told to the public and convenient left to the second page? So here's my question. And I'm hoping, and I'll raise this secret deal which Mr. Feeney released in Parliament, so it's public knowledge. Speculation. Why is this item being discussed in closed secret meeting of the City of Darebin? Specifically why, when it comes to the Preston market development, any information which is to be delivered to the community and to the traders, it's kept secret or clandestine or kept out of the public eye? And secondly, who is this development for? What is the development? And when is the proposed development scheduled to start? And is the Minister and the VPA aware of it?
Thank you for your question. CEO, did you want to respond?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for the question, Mr. Spiteri. With regard to the first point that you make, which is the provisions relating to confidentiality, thank you, because you've actually highlighted a typo. So, and it pertains to the second part of your question, there is no development. So actually the provision for which we should have declared the item confidential is F, under section 89 of the Act, which relates to legal advice, and also about section H, which is about something that might prejudice a decision of the council. So I can assure you that at this point in time, I'm absolutely unaware of any development proposal for the site. So there's no development, there's no developer. If there is, I'm not aware of it.
Sorry, was it just a typo? It should have been F and H and not E. Okay. Thank you. We'll move now to the questions that were submitted outside the chamber. So the first question is from Marianne Harper. Where? No, I didn't think she was around. Okay, I can read out her question. It is often forgotten that governments are elected to serve the best interests of the community. If councils wish to be recognised as the closest form of government to the people, then they have to take responsibility for challenging unacceptable policies implemented by other tiers of government. If their policies are not in our interest, we demand our local government challenge them. To do this, they need organisation and allies. Will Council undertake to call on other councils, affected unions and community groups to mount a campaign to ensure councils are entitled to continue to serve their elderly citizens' needs and not be penalised by unjust privatisation as proposed by the federal government? As I said in response to an earlier question, no decision has been made about the course of action Council will take in response to the aged care reforms and future action in terms of creating an age-friendly city, but we will be considering that an item on tonight's agenda. So once, I guess, we've resolved in a course of action, we'll be able to provide a response to that question. I've got a whole stack of them. I have your name listed here as someone who will make a submission, and we'll get to the submissions after we deal with the questions. Yep. Okay, the next question is from Leonora Spry. I can read it, okay, yep. The first question is, what does Darebin Council intend to do with its 220 aged care staff if the service doesn't continue to be provided by Darebin Council? And the second question is, does Darebin Council know what may happen for the majority of these employees who are predominantly women and rely on Darebin Council to provide them with the high quality of employment and conditions within this sector? Again, there's no decision that's been made. I don't like to speculate on matters that relate to staff, but this will be a decision that will be made by Council in terms of the course of action that we will take, whether it is a review or not, and how we will get to a decision about our response to the aged care reforms and our role in providing an age-friendly Darebin. The next question is from Robin Vogt. Where are you? I can't see you. Oh, there you are.
Madam Mayor, in 2016, the Active and Healthy Ageing Board, AHAB as we're known, of which I am a member, was consulted by Darebin Council staff about the future of Council's disability services under the NDIS. We were put under considerable pressure to agree that Council should cease providing disability services once the NDIS reached our area. We finally agreed to Council pulling out of service provision after obtaining an agreement that funds saved by Council would be applied to advocating for and supporting people with disabilities, not only Council's existing clients, who were confused by the process of switching providers or dissatisfied with the NDIS. AHAB members involved in these negotiations recall this agreement clearly and will verify this statement. At the Council meeting on the 30th of April, I asked a question from the gallery on this matter about the promised services which apparently have not been funded or implemented. The question was taken on notice and I was promised a written response. I have not received a response. Why should AHAB members or members of the community trust a council which reneges on such a straightforward agreement? When will I receive a response to this rather simple question that I asked on the 30th of April? Thank you.
So I might ask Ms Henderson to respond to that, given that it is within her area, the General Manager of Community. So I'll hand over to you.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. Ms Vogt, I want to apologise that you haven't received a response in writing yet, and you will tomorrow. I believe I misunderstood the council system that's in place for answering questions without notice, so I apologise. In relation to the actual topic, we had a good discussion at an informal meeting on Thursday night about this topic, and yes, I believe it is the case that a discussion occurred with AHAB, and that the members of AHAB are now disappointed because the withdrawal of disability services has seen to a reduction in funding allocation to those services. We still do provide disability services, but not as much as we did. We'll provide that answer in writing to you tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Henderson. The next question is from Hermione, and I'm sorry, I can't understand. Yes? Yes. It would be... we need to give you a microphone, so if you could...
Thank you. I actually read my question. What I want to know, why does the council consider spending $250,000 on a report into aged care when we already had a petition with 1,222 signatures? It's not working.
Yeah,
okay.
If you just like to start from the top, sorry. Yes.
Start again. Why does the council consider spending $250,000 on a report into aged care when a petition with 1,222 signatures has already, you have the petition there? That's what I wanted to know. Why? Why would you spend all that money when easily we can get more signatures if you want them? And the other thing is, I can do them all together now.
Yes.
Is there, what I want to do personally is the councillors in there that they have conflict of interest? That is, they're already an aged care supplier.
Yes, so I'll deal with that quickly first. Okay. Councillor Messina has already declared that conflict and will not be participating in item 8.1 this evening. Your first question is, why does council consider spending? So council has been, the officers have put forward a recommendation to council this evening around our response to the aged care reforms and the process for decision making around that. So our decision, or our job tonight is to consider the officers' advice and make a decision about what we think is in the best interest of our community. So that is the process that we will go through this evening. So that, I guess, is the role of the administration, to provide options for council to consider and then make our decision. So that's what's been put forward as a recommendation for us to consider. Thank you. Yes, so Councillor Messina has already declared. The next, that one's a submission. The next question is from Surian. Yep.
Thanks, Mayor and the councillors and the CEO. Well, my question is this. I'm not supporting that council spend $250,000 on consultation, but if they do, I want to put to you that we need to have, as part of the terms of reference, one item exploring to retain the services within the council. So proper study done by the consultants on that, and the report, when it comes to the council, it addresses that question of how do we retain the services. That's one. I was also hoping to make a summation quickly. The other thing that I'm hoping the consultants will do, not that I'm supporting them, but if they do get the approval of the council, what I'm hoping, you see, basic democracy must override market forces. The elderly residents, I'm one of the elderly residents now, right? So we want our voice heard very clearly. That's basic democracy. So what we hope, without spending a lot of money, let us write to the 3,000 recipients who receive the services. Do you want the council to continue the services? Simple democratic act. And maybe if you want to expand it for potential old people like me over the age of 65, do you want the council to run this, or do you want it to be privatized and have this consumer direct, what you call other services? Very simple question. It doesn't cost money, only just the mailing to the potential address. So I think in the name of democracy, I think we should do that. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll take those last statements as a submission. In response to the first part around whether there must be options included in terms of retaining aged care services within council, the terms of reference, if adopted as they are, do include that provision. So the panel will consider and investigate a range of options, including continuation of existing council services to older people. So I think if they're adopted, if council follows the officer's recommendation and adopts these term of references, it is already included in there. The next questions are from Dulcie Hook. We'll just get you a microphone. Yes? Okay, yes.
I have two questions, but first of all, I understand I want to make a submission,
yes.
So I need to ask now. I want to say now that I would like the opportunity to make a submission regarding item 8.1, re the Age and Disability Program, just prior to that session.
Yes.
Will you grant that, please?
I'll pop your name onto this list here. Yep. Okay, so we'll go to your questions first. Yep.
Question 1. Re the Age and Disability Program. When councillors Susan Newton, Lena...
Just, yeah, if you hold the microphone, yes, beautiful.
Sorry.
Thank you.
When councillors Susan Newton, Lena Messina and Susan Rennie visited Darebin Progress Association meeting on the 2nd of May, they said council had not yet made a decision regarding the federal government's My Aged Care program. Reality seems somewhat different. Last December, I was telephoned quite out of the blue and given a My Aged Care number and the allied details. I will say, as yet, I am still getting council help. B, I'm told people needing higher care than I do have already been moved over. C, the councillors seem more keen on social activities rather than with the essential help we need. That's home help, shopping, meals, and we wish to maintain those through the council. D, anyone looking for information at the council library, the customer service centres, is directed only to the My Aged Care program. There's nothing directing you to council to ask about help. My question, will you hold genuine community consultations, really listen to the community and act for the real needs of us all? Thank you.
Okay, so I guess in response to some of the points that you raised, in terms of the changes that have already taken place with My Aged Care, the My Aged Care system has already been implemented, and so people who are getting the services provided have been moved on to this new system called My Aged Care. So that change has happened, and that change has happened everywhere. And if you want to receive a service, you will need to go via My Aged Care, who will make an assessment on your services, who will then refer you on to the different services providers that provides that service to you, and then you can choose who you can go with, and council is one of those service providers that you could choose. So those changes have already taken place and have been implemented. At the moment, I believe My Aged Care call centre is being contracted, or council is providing that service, so you ring council as My Aged Care. No, sorry. Ms Henderson, do you want to clarify? Just in terms of the process, yep.
Mayor, just to clarify everything, you're correct that the My Aged Care phone call system and web system is already in place.
Yes.
And anybody that wants to access council's aged care services has to first go through the My Aged Care system. That's absolutely correct. The My Aged Care call centre or website will then refer you on for assessments. And at the moment in Darebin runs that assessment service for the federal government.
Yes.
Which is
what I was...
That's right.
Yep.
Yes.
Trying to explain, but you're doing it much better.
And we acknowledge that many clients do not enjoy that or welcome that. We acknowledge that, but it's part of the federal funding system at the moment.
Thank you. And then in response to your question around will you hold genuine community consultations and really listen to the community, I'd just like to point out that tonight we will make a decision on the process going forward. And I would be very supportive of a process that has genuine community consultation and an opportunity to hear from all of the people in our community, particularly those who are currently being provided services and anyone else who has an interest in aged care service provision.
All right, thank you. And my second question is re-consultations and information sessions. Consultations and information sessions are not satisfactory if the community, that's all connected with the issue, are not aware of them. Quite by accident, I found out about the Aged Care Reforms Information Session in April this year. I told others, but many more were not aware. It was poorly attended. Another point is, along with others, I could not hear the questions. You need to ensure the use of a microphone. Are you aware that not everyone, including me, has a computer? You need to communicate with all people appropriate to the sessions. One day, with the meals delivery, I received a leaflet, re social support groups. Why wasn't the Aged Care Reforms Information Sessions leaflet circulated that way? Also clearly advertised at council venues. The Darebin Community News was not received by some before the sessions. Question, will you please ensure that all affected people receive early advice of consultations and information sessions? Okay.
Yes, thank you for that feedback. That is really valuable to us to make sure that we get it right. And as you point out, there are many different ways we can communicate to the community, but I think we also need to think about who our audience is for what we're trying to communicate. So that feedback will be passed on to officers, and they can consider improving the communication next time to make sure that that it's received in a timely manner and also in a way that is accessible to the community. Councillor Greco?
I just noticed that the question time...
Yes, thank you. So Councillor Greco is proposing a procedural motion that we extend question and submission time by 15 minutes, and that's seconded by Councillor Williams. All those in favour? That motion is carried. That brings me to all of the questions. Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, I've got submissions. We haven't done submissions, but we're just getting through questions still. Okay, so we'll go to the rest of the submissions relating to 8.1 can be made at the start of the agenda item. So we'll hold those submissions until the start of the agenda item when council will consider that item. So are there any questions now? Yes. Oh, we'll go up to here first.
My name's Anne Learmont. I'm part of the Active and Ageing Advisory Committee and also a receiver of a limited amount of assistance with staying at home. I have two questions. Do you want me to ask them individually? Yeah.
Whichever you like. Yep.
Question one, could you please explain why the review to create an age-friendly Darebin is so unfocused and wide-ranging? The recent petition from more than 1,000 Darebin residents sought research into and a decision on Council's position on continuing involvement in service delivery after the implementation of the federal government's aged care changes. This proposal of a review on an age-friendly Darebin is not what was asked for by the petitioners, who asked Council to conduct a brief, effective research and make a decision in a timely manner. That this focus on aged care changes has almost vanished into a wider review is of great concern to me and to others here tonight.
I may get Ms Henderson to make a comment about that. It's the recommendation that is coming to Council to consider, and so I guess the question is, why is the review proposed to be broad in nature?
Madam Mayor, through you, Madam Mayor. The Council thanks you for the question, Ms Learmonth. The reason that we as officers made the report consider the broad topic of how to create an age-friendly Darebin is because it's really important, and the community is changing, and federal government funding and other sorts of funding are changing. And in that context, to look at the big picture for how this council can support a truly inclusive, truly supportive and empowering approach to including the older people of Darebin is important. That said, officers and myself were mindful that we didn't want the key pragmatic issues of who's providing what services to whom, that everybody is very concerned about and cares about a lot, that mustn't be lost. And so that's why it appears explicitly in black and white in the draft terms of reference and says this review must consider, must invite feedback on, must investigate what's going to happen with existing services and look at how to have those services continue, how that would look, as well as looking at other options. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that leads me directly to question 2. Could Council please provide details about the proposed review into an age-friendly Darebin? And I know that this is happening tonight, so my question is around why we didn't do this, what I'm asking for earlier. What is the selection process for panel members? How many panel members will there be and what expertise will be requested? And most importantly for me and others, how will members of the Active and Healthy Ageing Advisory Board and other interested and knowledgeable residents be involved in the panel selection, the consultation and the production of the report?
Thank you for that question. I might again ask Ms Henderson to provide a response. There's a microphone now in front of you.
Through you, Madam Mayor, the proposed terms of reference of the review and the proposed summary preliminary communications and engagement plan make it clear that this review, this proposed review is predicated on real engagement with the community and real engagement with the clients of current services. It's not particularly easy to engage with all the clients of our current services because, as we've heard spoken about tonight, we've got many, many clients for whom it's not particularly easy to leave the house. So we're expecting that there'll be small bands of staff going out with iPads to interview those who wish to be interviewed about their views. We also need to ensure that people are accommodated to speak in in languages of their choice. And we also will have information sessions and public hearings as well. But the communications plan is predicated on that people need to be consulted who don't have the internet and who can't easily make it to a public info session or consultation session. So there'll be a variety of approaches to trying to engage people.
And there was another part to that question around the panel members. Sorry. In relation to the panel members, the councillors will be voting on that later this evening, and I actually think it can be talked about further once council's debated it. Okay, thank you. Other questions? So can I just have an indication of who else has a question? Is there just 3, 4, 5? Okay. We'll go over here first. If you'd like to... Oh, okay. Just come down to the lectern.
Madam Mayor, thank you. It's opportune to follow the question from Anne.
If you could just state your name and suburb,
And
please.
I'm Jeff Richards, from a member of the community here and the AHAB board. I've only just come back today from interstate, so I'm only looking at this in here, and I wanted to query the panel membership of it. It's staggering that it would appear from reading that you've got 2 public servants, one in public health and human services and one in local government, and they're the 2 members of it. If there are 2, it's up to 2, I would see that as not satisfactory. Council appoint panel members and appoint one of the members as chairperson. My question is, will council review upwards the composition of the panel and widen that membership? outside of local government and government.
I might take that as a statement. Council will consider, if we decide to adopt the recommendation, who we appoint to that panel, and it is up to the council to decide on the number of panel members and who is on that panel. So a decision hasn't been made. The officers have put forward a recommendation, and I guess the submission that you're making is that we should have more than two.
Yes, having a look. I gathered
Yep.
Ms Henderson indicated something that way too.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to come forward to the... Okay.
My name is Sri RSK Sri. I'm a resident of Preston. Lived here for 30 years. I first want to put a human face to this issue on aged care services. There are people like my mother who's sitting over here. She's got a good command of English, and yet she would find it difficult trying to organize the different services and to get what she needs. Fortunately, for the moment, she doesn't need any aged care services. So, and also at the same time, there are lots of residents in my area, in Preston and in Reservoir. Many of them do not even speak the language, and they find it difficult to contact different services to organize everything. What these people need is a one-stop shop to be able to contact so that they can get these services. And only today at 4:30 did Jed Carney in the federal parliament say that we should take care of the vulnerable, especially in regards to our aged care services. And that will show how we are looked on as a nation when we look after our aged people. So, so my question is, why are you considering privatizing these services out to different agencies when even people like my mother who can speak English would find it difficult trying to organize all these different services?
So Council isn't deciding whether we privatise the aged care services this evening. The federal government has introduced reforms which has changed the market conditions, and we are going through a process of what is being proposed tonight is to go through a process to assess the impact of those changes on our ability to deliver the services. So whether we can continue delivering the services as we have always done will be an option.
Good.
Whether we need to change the way we deliver the services to continue to deliver the services is an option. Whether there are better providers in the market for those services is also an option. The review that's being proposed is a broad review, which was pointed out by another question, to look at all of the different options that are available. Also to look at, are there any services that Council isn't currently providing, but there is a gap in the market because the market isn't filling it. It's a market failure. So the review that is being proposed is a broad review to put all options on the table and to investigate how we could execute whichever decision we decide to take, whether it is to continue in services, transform the services, enter new service provisions. So that no decision has been made. Council has not taken a decision to privatise any services.
Yep. Just please consider how vulnerable a lot of these aged people are.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's a question.
There's a question here at the front. At the back. Yeah.
Madam Mayor, my name is Eleanor Tamburini and I am an employer of the City of Darebin for the last 26 years and I am a home carer or CSW, and I have been to a lot of these elderly people to service them. So from the members from our employment, which is the home carers, it's a question that I need to ask, and it may be a little bit premature, but I still like to ask it. Will Council commit to some level of home care after 2020, or will the decision be made to completely cease the service? That is a big question.
So no decision has been made about that. The decision that is currently before Council this evening is to endorse a process of decision-making, a process to make that decision. And so I cannot comment on whether we will or we will not remain in that service after 2020, but we hopefully will be clearer about how we will get to that decision after the meeting this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. There is a question up the back here. Yes?
Hi, my name is Paula Wooden. I live in Reservoir, clearly the hub of multi-storey building at the moment. And I want to know what you're doing to enforce the regulations around the times that builders can operate. Because I know clearly that 9 o'clock on a Saturday, and they're actually there. Could be multiple people pouring concrete at 6:30 in the morning. Multiple times I've complained. What are you doing? Seriously, some of you must have run on a policy to enforce your current rules and regulations. What are you going to do about it? They're working Sundays, they're not allowed. They work public holidays, they're not allowed. I know these things are not widely known, the times that they can build, but for a shift worker, it's damn annoying.
Yeah.
And I really want my council to start enforcing these regulations that you have. And I don't want to be told, oh, well, it's not the builder's fault, they don't really know. I'm pretty sure they sign a contract with this outlined. So tell me what you're going to do about it.
Thank you for your question, and I'm sorry to hear about the circumstances that you're experiencing.
It's gone on for years, you've done nothing for years.
Okay, and that's, I guess, good feedback for the council. I have been contacted on a number of occasions when this is the case, where residents are experiencing construction outside of the approved hours, and have referred that on to officers to respond. And so once officers have been informed of that, they are out there and willing to investigate and enforce those rules. It sounds like your experience isn't that.
Sorry, I mean, I can give you my reference numbers of my complaints where I follow up after 2 weeks and no one's been out there, so maybe you're not employing enough people to enforce this.
Yes, I'm very happy to follow that up. If you'd like to provide those reference numbers, I'm happy to refer it to the CEO to investigate that. Thank you. And there was one more question. Yeah, one more question here at the front, and we're over time. So if someone would like to propose an extension of time, Councillor Messina is proposing to extend it by 5 minutes, and that's seconded by Councillor McCarthy. All those in favour? Motion's carried.
Thank you. Got bits and pieces all over the place. I'm sorry from the wrong way. Is this on? It's on. Okay. Right.
If you'd just like to state your name first.
My name is Audrey Grace. I'm a resident, and I'm also a member of the infamous Active and Healthy Ageing Board. Well represented tonight. It's stated in the document to be presented tonight, 8.1, Aged Care Reforms Progress for Decision Makers, is confirmation that a resolution was passed at the 13th February 2017 council meeting to establish a working group to develop a framework into how council can continue to provide quality in-house aged care services in view of the federal government's decision to cease block funding from July 2019. Now, I'm just remind you that this was the 13th of February 2017. Traditionally implemented by local government home and community care programs known as HAC. Okay. Now, my question is, can council please provide copies of the minutes of each meeting of the working group to the members of the Active and Healthy Ageing Board before our next meeting on June the 14th?
We have met regularly since that group was established in 2017, and I have no objections to releasing those minutes, but I will have to refer that to the CEO to make a decision on the release of that information. The officers, we'll have to take that on notice in terms of what record was made of those meetings. There is definitely an assembly of councillors that was recorded, which are all in the minutes and publicly available already, but we'll check with what other documentation we can provide. There are definitely agendas that we could provide you, as well as any notes that were taken.
Now, the second item. I'm presenting tonight to council a further 144 signatures to add to our petition. I wish to add that the bulk of all the signatures that I have received have not been from many elderly residents. No, they've been written by residents who could be their children or their grandchildren. Across Darebin, all age groups want the frail and elderly people in our community to be properly cared for in their twilight years. In considering Report 8.1 tonight, will councillors please take this into account and act promptly to achieve the extra time required for decision making?
I'll take that as a statement in terms of for us to consider when we deliberate over 8.1.
That's right.
Thank you.
Now, you mentioned that council service volumes were falling steadily. Now, factors to consider in that are that council reduced the number of services offered. Council did not inform clients what services were still available and how to access them. A period of distinct poor continuity of care. Staff were sent to different clients. For example, during 2016, I had 13 different staff assist me in a consecutive period. Others told me that they had similar experiences. They were naturally very dissatisfied. But how did the staff feel, as this made their work very much harder?
Thank you. Okay. Are there any further questions? Okay, this is the last question, I think. If you'd like to come forward.
I haven't written anything down. My name's Michael Cook. I live in East Preston. And my question is to the Green members of this council, because I voted Greens and I have for the last 10 years. Now, we've had 30 years of market reform in this country. And it came to a crashing halt in 2008 with the general financial crisis, where people are questioning this need to contracting out, privatization, etc. Now, the reason I voted Greens is because of their brave policy on Invasion Day, supporting Aboriginal rights, and remembering that the land was taken from them. Their common sense stand on climate change and refugees. So I expect y'all to make a political decision, not a managerial decision. So I'm disappointed to hear people talking about market reform, transfers, speaking this language of human resource management, which I was part of when I was working. And when people say to me they haven't made a decision, I've said that also. But if you've already made the decision because we've accepted the parameters of the status quo. Now, what I want to say is for 30 years, we have heard the elite talking about privatization, contracting out. They have a conversation with themselves. They use terminology that is obtuse. Most of us don't fully understand what they're talking about, what Don Watson calls weasel words. What I want the council to do, because that's why I vote for you guys, is to be quite clear on the choices the community makes. The community has to make a simple choice whether they want to keep the services in-house or they want to outsource it. Because as we know with NDIS and other aged care services, it's been a bleeping disaster. And I'm in my mid-60s, and I don't look forward to a world of outsourcing. And what's not discussed also is that we're moving full-time staff into a casualized workplace where they basically risk their employment conditions. We know that outsourcing especially affects women and people from ethnic backgrounds adversely. So what I don't want to hear is I haven't made a decision. What I want to hear is we're here to support the community. We do have a radical viewpoint, and it's a rational viewpoint. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you for your comment. I guess just in response, a very short response. Thank you for your comments. I can't actually answer a question if a decision hasn't been taken by council. I can't say how I feel about a particular issue when I'm responding to questions that are put to me in the chamber, which is difficult for me sometimes, but I'm here to represent the decisions that have already been made by council, not the future decisions that have been made by council, and not my opinions on individual matters. So I'm sorry that that's frustrating. It's frustrating for me as well, but I'm here to represent the decisions that have already been made by council to this point. I probably can say something different tomorrow, which will be great, because I'm quite frustrated that I can't be answering questions that you're putting to me this evening. Okay, I will take that as no other questions now, and we're out of time. So we'll move now to deal with petitions, because it was raised by one of the questioners that there is a petition.
Mayor, I have a petition that's been handed to me by some of our ratepayers.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Greco.
Mayor, I'll read out the petition. There's 144 signatories to this petition. This petition was previously presented to Council, and this is an extension of the petition. I think one of the gallery members said they could collect as many petitions as we want, but here are an extra 144. I'll read out the petition. The petition reads as follows: We, the undersigned residents and ratepayers of Darebin, petition Council to publicly commit to maintaining its current role as a provider of aged care services, including transport, cleaning, personal care, meals, home maintenance and respite care into the future. We urge Council not to abandon its role in providing the above aged care services in view of the federal government's privatisation agenda of aged care services. We are proud that Darebin Council is a long-standing provider of high-quality aged care services and has built a strong and trusted reputation as a preferred provider with elderly residents and their families in the community. In Darebin, 25,534 people, which represents 18.8% of the total population, are aged over 60, and many are receiving or will soon require support services to enable them to remain in their home. We firmly believe that Council and the future aged community members should continue to have the choice to receive home care services directly from trusted and committed Darebin Council staff. There are 144 signatures which I submit. And may I say also that I understand that this matter will be dealt with item 8.1 in the Council agenda.
Yep, so
tonight.
So the proposal is that the Council receives the additional signatures to the petition that was tabled at the Council meeting on the 30th of April, and that it is noted that it is responded to in item 8.1 this evening. Is there a seconder for that? That's seconded by Councillor Rennie. All those in favour to accept this petition? That motion is carried. Councillor Amir.
I'd also like to put forward a petition. I'd like to put forward a motion that Council notes the petition from the residents of Queen Street in Reservoir, removing the removal of the 2-hour parking restrictions installed in 2016, and receives a report on options for managing parking in this street.
Thank you. Is there what's the motion that you're moving? That
was the motion. So that Council notes the petition and receives a report for options to manage parking in the street.
Okay, sorry. So Councillor Messina, that's seconded by Councillor Messina. All those in favour to accept that petition? That motion is carried. Item 7.
Mayor, I'd like to move a procedural motion.
Yes, thank you.
I'd like to move a procedural motion that we consider item 14, consideration of reports considered confidential, after item 9 before continuing on to item 10. This is because the decision made in item 14 may impact on consideration of item 10.1 as they refer to similar content.
Okay, and that's seconded by Councillor Rennie. All those in favour of that procedural motion? And against? That motion is carried. Okay, so that means that item 14 will now be considered after item 9. Item 7 is urgent business. Is there any urgent business? No urgent business. Item 8, consideration of reports. 8.1, aged care reforms process. Hang on, can I just get through the title? Yeah, hang on, aged care, hang on, you need to declare the conflict first. Let me get through the title and then we can get to doing business. Aged care reforms, process for decision making and response to petition. Councillor Messina. Turn your mic on.
Apologies.
And is it a direct or indirect conflict?
It is an indirect conflict.
Of
I hereby declare.
Oh, you
that
don't need to read it again. You'll just need to state that it's an indirect conflict.
It's an indirect conflict as I work currently in the industry, yes. And it could be viewed that I'm working in a competitive market.
Which is seen as a conflicting duty. Yes. Okay. Thank you. We'll wait for Councillor Messina to leave the chamber.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Greco.
I would like to move an alternate motion to item 8.1, and it will appear up on the screen. I'll give members of the councillors.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Greco.
Well, I'll first give councillors an opportunity to read it, or also I'll give members of the gallery an opportunity to read the motion.
Councillor Greco, would you like to now speak to the motion?
Okay. Yes, I will speak to this motion. Councillors, we've heard a lot of questions from the gallery. There's a lot of concern in relation to aged care, and the motion that I'm putting forward, councillors, is that basically, councillors, this is a threshold issue for council. It's often been said that we need to make a decision. So what I'm offering up tonight, councillors, is that we finally make a decision about not privatising and not outsourcing our aged care services. Let's make that decision up front and not go down the path of trying to spend $250,000, which I would say is a waste of money, taxpayer, ratepayer money, in asking the community what we ought to do. That we've had over nearly 1,400 petitions, signed petitions that have come to council, saying that the community does not want council to privatise or outsource or no longer deliver aged care services. Everyone that I've spoken to in the community, there's not one person that I've spoken to in the community has ever raised with me to say that council should get out of the business of providing aged care services. So councillors, rather than looking at the economics of this, and rather than looking at it from a managerial perspective, I think what we have to do is make a value-based decision. We have the opportunity tonight to make that decision, and in making that decision, what we would do is actually use then the opportunity to go out, talk to the community about how we can deliver aged care services to the community, not whether we should or we should not deliver aged care services to the community. We need to state that up front. It's important that we do that. It's important both for our community perspective, because we're dealing with the most vulnerable, and also it's important for, as the motion says, there's over 200 people that work in the City of Darebin, that work for the City of Darebin, who provide quality aged care services. And as has been pointed out by some of the audience members, that many of them are women, and many of them are migrants, and that their livelihoods and their jobs will be affected by us not making a decision. So, councillors, I urge you to support my alternate motion. It gets this issue out of the way so we can move forward and finally take a stand, a principled stand, a stand based on values that we maintain and not privatise or not outsource aged care services in the City of Darebin.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Okay, sorry, now we're a little bit out of order. We'll now hear from the people who would like to make a submission. Councillor Greco got to his feet quite quickly, so we didn't hear from the submitters first. So I'll call on Dr. Sarah Russell to address the council, if you'd like to come to the lectern.
Thank you. I am the Director of Aged Care Matters, and I will certainly sign the petition before I leave tonight. I would like to commend the Council for putting aged care on the agenda and also for signing the Aged Care Friendly Victoria Declaration. So well done, Council. Now I have 2 minutes to convince the councillors and perhaps the council workers as well not to spend $250,000 on an expert panel. I spoke earlier today with Councillor Susan Rennie in response to an email in which I sent to all the councillors yesterday. And I certainly understand that spending $250,000 is money well spent if it informs spending, say, $100 million in the best interest of the community down the track. But I'm not in favour of spending that money, and this is why. As I understand it, and I hope I understand it correctly, the expert panel's job will be focused on 2 things: aged care friendly cities and home care. So let me start with aged care friendly cities. I've got 2 minutes, so I'm watching the clock, don't worry. My colleague at Aged Care Matters is on the Strategic Advisory Group for the World Health Organisation Global Network of Aged Care Friendly Cities and Communities. So she's extremely well informed about this space. And she tells me today that there is an abundance of studies that address the big picture, which is what you said earlier. You want to address the big picture. There are so many studies that I could give you tomorrow, if you'd like them, that is exactly what you're asking the expert panel to do. So my argument here is, please don't waste ratepayers' money reinventing the wheel. However, I do understand the importance of genuine community consultation. And I agree it's really important to consult people, particularly those over... How long? Sorry?
10 seconds. 10 seconds.
Oh, really? Please let me keep going just for a bit longer. I've been waiting for ages. Because it's really important that people who don't use the internet, which is most of the older people nowadays who are over sort of 70, and they don't require expensive consultants to come and talk to them. They actually require the councillors to show, just for starters, that they are genuinely listening to a petition of 1,400 people. That would be a good start. Let me just quickly move on to my second argument, which is the most important argument, and that is about the home care space. I don't know that you really understand what's going on. I'm sorry to be, that sounds patronising, but it's correct to say there's been major changes about the federal government's funding and provision of aged care. There have been major changes, and that influences the council's decision. But these changes are happening much more slowly than we all thought. And I was talking today to the director of the home care in the federal government, because I'll tell you in a minute, I'm doing a big project on home care, a research project, and she tells me that she wouldn't be wasting her money on $250,000. Now that's coming from the top. And her reason is we're moving towards an integrated system. We don't know what that integrated system is going to look like, but it includes the Commonwealth Home Support Program, and it also includes home care packages. I really just need to say this because it's such an opportunity for Darebin to act. You have a great reputation of home care services. People in the audience have told us how good it is. You have a great opportunity once this is integrated, and I'm happy to discuss for free, no money, I will tell you for free how you can really take advantage of the integrated space. But I want to finally just mention...
Sorry, Dr Russell, you're 1 minute and 40 minutes over time.
I know, but I'm just letting you know.
Just to respect the process. It is the local law.
Fair enough,
there are other people waiting to speak.
Fair enough, that is fair enough.
Yes.
But I am doing a study on home care, exactly what you're asking the expert panel to do, and I've started it today, just coincidentally, with the Commonwealth Government. And I will be interviewing people in their homes.
Thank you, Dr Russell. Sorry. If I could call on Robin Vogt to make a submission.
This is a hard act to follow. I'm going to sound very flat. I have studied, Madam Mayor and Councillor, I have studied the aged care reforms, process for decision-making and response to petition paper, and wish to make this statement. The paper is well written, covers all relevant bases, and puts forward a range of options to be explored and for Council to consider before it makes a decision. about the future of its aged care services. The trouble is that the recommended process will obscure the critical issue at stake, i.e. the future of Council's existing aged care services. The 1,400 plus people who signed the petition, which was tabled at the Council meeting on the 30th of April and then again tonight, could not have been clearer. They all signed a statement asking Council to continue to provide its aged care services beyond the full implementation of My Aged Care reforms. I believe that the petition is still being circulated and more residents and ratepayers have signed it. Yes, wow. I can assure everyone here this evening that the people who signed the petition all asked for background information, and many expressed horror that Council could consider, under any circumstances, abandoning its elderly citizens. The signatories will observe the outcome of their stated resolve. 23 seconds. Now we are presented with a paper advocating a complex and extremely costly process to consult and explore options for the future of aged care. This is the process which should have been undertaken in the 2017 consultancy, expensive consultancy, which produced the Inadequate and Disappointing Needs of Older People in Darebin report. What a waste of money that was. Interestingly, the AHAB, Council's advisory body, was not consulted at all before or during the production of this most recent paper. Councillors, I urge you to reject the report's recommendation, the associated process and the significant costs. Instead, commission a report which explores how Council can continue to provide aged care, and fly a banner on the Town Hall which proudly declares Darebin cares for our elders.
Thank you for your submission. I'll now call on Audrey Grace.
Is that on? No. It is on. All right then. Madam Chair and councillors, the federal government's stated aim is to create better consumer choice for clients in accessing quality services. Access, however, is largely a matter of personal capability. The very elderly and the frail are not able to act on their own behalf. Consider available research and evidence. I refer to a recent study, The Marketisation of Care, Rationales and the Consequences in Nordic and Liberal Care Regimes. That is Sweden, England and Australia, which has been made available to Darebin Council and staff. This study noted that in Australia, only recently services to the elderly, albeit funded by government, had been largely provided by the non-profit sector, and that currently there is a strong move to marketisation in Australia, and that considerable evidence shows that the difficulties experienced by consumers in making informed decisions about care and indicates that not all social groups have the same capacity to exercise choice based on their command of information and other resources, and that market-generated inequalities have been exacerbated. This has revealed a major weakness in the application of market models to care. That's page 388. Consumer choice could leave older and frail users less rather than more empowered. It appears to me that there are three levels of persons described as elderly. Those capable enough to participate in society who use their free time to contribute, for example, on a committee or as a volunteer. Those capable of looking after themselves, who get out and about, join social, cultural and fitness groups. those who can no longer care for themselves, who would be incapable of choosing services to assist them. This demographic in particular requires staff to be regular and long-term, so they feel confident in having them in their home, and in particular with personal care needs like showering and dressing. These staff need to be trustworthy and not steal from them. I would like to remind you that a particularly valuable service is conducted by the Darebin Council HAC staff. They're required to report to their managers any deterioration in the health of their clients or any decrease in capability that concerns them. This in itself is a strong reason for Darebin Council to continue as a service provider to their elderly and frail residents. Do not agree to this unnecessary process.
Thank you. Thank you for your submission. We've got one last submitter, which is Dulcie Hook. We'd just like to get a microphone to the front here. Yep. Thanks.
Thank you. This is a submission regarding item 81. I'm asking the CEO and appropriate council people to ensure, A, that council does not spend $250,000 on privatisation of the consultation process regarding the Age and Disability Program. B, that the community and appropriate export people within council consult and decide how the program be retained. C, take action and make decisions now. Do not delay and string it out. It cannot be justified to spend $250,000 of the council budget unnecessarily on people outside council. Use the funds on the community. The community needs council to continue to provide the current council Age and Disability Program. On a wide scale, council is close to the community and the community can easily contact the appropriate council person they need. Council well understands their local community. We need to be confident in our helpers. After all, we are the Darebin ratepayers. We residents, ratepayers of Darebin, need council to hold genuine consultations with the community and appropriate council people. I asked the CEO to name the experts within council who can best assist with the consultations. It is high time the action is taken now and a decision made on how best for council to continue to provide its age and disability program needed by us for whom you were elected to care. Act now, do not abandon us. Thank you.
Thank you. So that brings us to the end of the submission. So we'll now go to the seconder, so Councillor Williams.
Got to get used to these microphones. The federal government plans to integrate Commonwealth Home Support Program and home care packages, but we don't know the ramifications of this transition will be and who will regulate the services, the follow-up community complaints. I'm very proud that this council has one of the highest, if not the highest standard of home care to people of this community. I strongly recommend continuing these services until proven otherwise. Spending $250,000 on a report how best to making Darebin an age-friendly city, when we should be looking at getting our officers to reporting back to how best to stay in the aged care and look after our most vulnerable in the community. The expert panel are very well known and have come at a high regard, especially with their outstanding background and expertise. But is it worth spending $250,000 for a report that will not give councillors guarantee why we should or should not continue with home care? In the past, Darebin Council has shown to be making change on this council without spending the $250,000 or the requirement of an expert panel. The ratepayers of Darebin would rather spend the $250,000 towards repairing footpaths, tree planting, removal of graffiti and upgrading female-friendly pavilions and making the people of this community feel safe in our streets.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor Lasserf. I'm going to speak against this motion, and there are a number of reasons for that. Firstly, I think this motion would have us make a decision tonight, but we actually don't have enough information to make a decision tonight. We don't fully understand the cost implications of continuing to deliver the services. We don't fully understand what services will be needed in 5 years' time, given the steady decline in the use of our services over the past few years. And we haven't yet explored what it would look like for us to stay in the services, and in fact which services we should be delivering and which services we could be potentially delivering that we now don't deliver. There are too many unanswered questions for us to be making a decision such as this tonight, and that's why I don't propose to support this. Like all of my colleagues, I am very committed to looking after Darebin's older population, particularly its frail elderly. But I think we would be remiss not to get all the information so that we can understand fully how to best do that. And I think the process that has been suggested will give us better information so that we can ultimately arrive at a decision that will be not just for the next year or the next 5 years, but a decision that will stand us in good stead for the next 20 or 30 years so that we can fully meet the needs of people who are ageing in our community.
Thank you, Councillor Rennie. I'll just remind everybody, if you could please remain silent while the councillors are debating the item, and give full respect to everybody here this evening. Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Mayor Lasserf. So I'd also like to speak in opposition to the amended motion. So I really want to reassure everyone that we're not abandoning anyone. We have the needs of our older residents at the heart of everything we want to do. And I think the fact that we've just spent the first hour and a half of the council meeting listening to your questions and your submissions indicates to us how important this is to the community. And so that's why, particularly with something like number 5, I can't support that we make a decision tonight on a commitment about how we deliver services into the future. I just think we're not ready for that. And I think the amount of questions, the amount of submissions that we've had shows how important this is to our community. And that's why I think the office's recommendation, which is to have an expert panel, which is to take this really seriously when we're talking about $6 million a year of ratepayers' money and how we spend that into the future, I think this is something that we have to take incredibly seriously. And I think I can't support the amended motion for that reason. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Newton. Are there any further speakers? Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to start off by actually thanking all the submitters and all the questions tonight, and I think the quality of the debate, which is very rarely heard in such rigour and passion in council chambers. It is extraordinary, actually, the level of knowledge that we have in our community about this issue. One thing that deeply concerns me, and I'll just bring the microphone closer, is something that's actually not covered in the motion, but certainly is covered in the report on page 8. I'm just going to read for everyone's information. A key legal issue beyond 2020 may be the application of competition policy to council's services to older people. This may limit the way that council can subsidise services into the future market in the provision of aged care services. Why is this important? In 2020 and beyond 2020, we have a situation where potentially that $6 million of council investment may in fact not be allowed to be provided to our own aged care services under the current model. So 46% of the aged care funding in Darebin is actually funded by Darebin ratepayers. The remaining 54% is actually from state and federal money. Now, I do not want to see almost 50% of the money that currently goes into aged care in Darebin disappear because of federal competition policy. That's what we're up against. That's not covered in the motion at all. It certainly, if we are to ignore that fact, we are basically setting up a situation where very close within the next 2 to 3 years, we could see a situation where 46% of the funding that we provide currently to aged care services cannot actually be provided in the way that it does, and certainly not under the current model. That is deeply troubling. Because what that does is that it means that those highly vulnerable people, the people that we know are not going to be supported by private operators, are going to be left to fend within a market-based system that actually does not support them at all. So I want a system, in fact, that actually puts these services back in the hands of residents and users.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Amir.
We had a request from the audience to use direct words and mention of a radical viewpoint that's a rational viewpoint. So I had a speech, which I'm not going to read. I'm going to be a lot more direct. So to me, a radical viewpoint means really looking at every option, looking past privatisation. So I oppose the privatisation of public services. I also oppose false binaries, which I've heard tonight, which cause fear and stifle the development of new ideas. We should be looking at public models, which have been discussed. We can also look at worker-owned models, client-owned models, peer-to-peer models, community-owned models, looking at everything possible to get really what's best for older people in Darebin and, of course, for workers as well, who are a very important part of this equation. I absolutely support the maintenance of the $6 million of funding provided by Darebin Council to continue to be provided for aged care services in Darebin. We also had a comment from the audience about the need for a one-stop shop, and it's ideas like that that are really wonderful and that we should be exploring along with other really great ideas that have come up through the consultation to date and that will continue to come up as we talk to more and more people. So we need to be not just looking at what do we do now, but also what other services could we be providing, like perhaps this one-stop shop liaison model. What are the current needs that are unmet under the current model? We don't know the answers to these questions, and I don't know either. That's why we want to look at all the different options. And that's what I want for myself, my parents, my own grandparents. This is a huge decision. I would even say possibly the biggest decision of our term as councillors. And I've had lots of conversations with people over the last year and have many, many more to come. Every conversation is really valuable. But I personally don't know the best way forward, and I really want to make the best decision, not just for people currently receiving services, but for all older people in Darebin and for everyone who will become older, which is hopefully all of us here today.
Thank you, Councillor Miam. Councillor Greco, would you like to the right of reply?
Yes, I'd like to respond to a few of the points that have been raised by councillors. First of all, the question about not enough information. This is not about information, this is about values. This is a decision about values, whether we privatise or whether we don't privatise. It's not a simple managerial type issue where you just get information and then you look at all the menu of options. This is about values. And the values that we're talking about is whether we privatise or whether we don't privatise. The second point that needs to be raised is that it's a very simple decision, councillors. It's a very simple decision. Either we're for privatisation or against privatisation. I hear a lot of rhetoric, especially from Green councillors, about being against privatisation. Here is your chance, councillors, to vote against privatisation and to say that council will commit to continue to provide aged care services. The other point, and I think it's incorrect by Councillor McCarthy to talk about the 46% being wasted because of competitive neutrality. Council can still provide the services even under a competitive neutrality regime. It's not that we are completely played out as a result of that. So it's incorrect, Councillor McCarthy, to make that claim. And I think that claim is a little bit of a scare campaign in terms of saying that council is going to lose its $6 million in relation to these particular services. The other thing too is that we need to make a decision, councillors. There is a lot of uncertainty out there in the community with our aged community. There's a lot of uncertainty with our employees. 220 people that we employ who are trusted, who are skilled, who go out there and provide services. Their jobs are in jeopardy as a result. And we could make a decision here now to actually create certainty both for our clients, our aged community, and also for our employees. So I urge councillors to really think about this. This is a threshold question for the council.
Thank you, Councillor.
And that we need to support this motion and not privatise or outsource council services.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Just for future contributions, Councillor Greco, when you're speaking, if you could hold your microphone down a little bit, it's a little bit loud, so it's sometimes unclear to hear. So if you could, I know, thank you. If you just hold it down a little bit further, we can hear it a bit clearer. Thank you. Now we've heard from all the speakers and the right of reply, so I'll now put that to the vote. All those in favour and against? That motion is now lost. Councillor Rennie.
I'd like to move the recommendation as per the officer's report.
And that's seconded by Councillor Amir. Councillor Amir has already seconded that, so we'll just go to hear from the mover and seconder, and then you can raise your
And
hand.
I think at this point I should add some names to the recommendation. So I recommend that Council establish the review panel on creating an age-friendly Darebin with terms of reference as attached as Appendix B, appoint Rhonda Galbally AO and Peter Allen as members of the review panel.
Thank you. So, Councillor Amir, you're happy to second that motion? Yes. Okay. Councillor Rennie.
Thank you. I think that the process that has been proposed is one that will be rigorous and will ultimately serve our community well. Over the next 20 years at Darebin's current rate of investment in aged services and services to older people in our community, we will be investing $130 million. I want to be sure that that money is going to be invested in such a way as to get the very best outcomes for all older people who live in Darebin. I'm not convinced that the best outcome from that $130 million will be to continue to do what we're doing now with our head in the sand as to changes that are happening around us. The Home and Community Care Program was established by the Commonwealth Government in 1984. At that time, Council leapt enthusiastically on board because there was an opportunity with that Commonwealth funding and some additional money that Council put in to deliver services to our older population. And that's something we know is very valuable. The Commonwealth Government is no longer delivering the Home and Community Care Program in the way that they did. I find it quite offensive to have this debate turned into one about privatisation. I think it is misleading and deceptive to our community. We are not privatising anything. We are not proposing to privatise anything. We are going about a process of thinking about how should we invest the millions of dollars that we're going to spend on our older population over the next decades. The services, in some respects, are not ours to privatise. I acknowledge that Council delivers these services, but they are funded and have been funded by the Commonwealth Government. They are Commonwealth Government funded services that the Commonwealth Government has decided to deliver in a different way. That may or may not include Council. We can't predict that, and there are a whole lot of factors that are well outside of our control. The time for advocacy on that issue, Councillor Greco in particular, was 4 or 5 years ago before most of us were elected to Council. But that ship sailed. The Commonwealth Government has implemented these changes. They take control of this outside of our hands. Our hands are tied in that we will no longer get the funding to deliver the services we had. We are nevertheless very committed to continuing to maintain an investment in our older population. I've worked for most of the last 20 years in public health. And working in public health, I ask the question, what is it that we can do that will create the greatest health benefit for our community? In this instance, it's the greatest benefit for people who are ageing in Darebin, particularly the aged, the frail, elderly.
10 seconds.
So I think this process that has been outlined is one which will enable us to get closer to that decision about how we might invest our money so that across our whole population, the greatest benefit is experienced by the largest number of older people.
Thank you, Councillor Rennie. Councillor Amir.
So given that we've all spoken on this already tonight, it's pretty clear that a majority of councillors here are not convinced that the short-term head in the sand, let's pretend that nothing is changing approach is the best one to go forward with. We can do a lot better, and that's what I'm really keen to see. The people listed here, they're not consultants in the KPMG or the you know, little guy on Collins Street style. These are leaders in the field, the best minds in the business, a disability advocate herself who has an Order of the Honour of Australia for her work in disability advocacy. And I'm so excited to see what options are put forward and what information is collected from the community. We've also heard quite a lot from the audience today with people saying that they're not happy with the consultation that's happening so far. We've also heard feedback with some people saying that they're not happy with the services that have been delivered. So this is the opportunity to be able to put forward ideas, to take on some of that feedback we've heard about people who were missed the first time round. Of course, in this, we will, yeah.
Sorry, no interjection from the gallery, please.
I have been in conversation.
You'll have to leave the chamber if you continue to interject, and I don't want that to happen. So if we could let the debate go on, please.
I have, in answer to the question, we have been in contact with the union. We will be speaking with them, and of course, it's one of the many players. But we need to do what's best for the Darebin community, not just for the next year, but for the 20 years into the future. And leaving that up to the whims of the federal government and the rules that might change is not a risk that I'm personally willing to take.
Thank you, Councillor Amir. I'll go to Councillor Greco, who has an amendment.
Yeah, I have an amendment. I'll read out the amendment. Is that the amendment replaces those 2 points and replaces it with this point here, that Council write to all our aged care recipients asking them to express their preferences on whether Council should maintain its Council home care service and continue to be a direct provider. So I move that amendment.
Just one moment. Is it directly based? Okay. I can't accept that as an amendment because the local law does say that an amendment must not directly oppose the motion. So it is actually taking out everything that is in the motion and replacing it with something else, which is not in line with the motion. So it can't be accepted as an amendment.
Mayor, I don't think that it actually, it's still in the vein of the motion that's there. The motion that's there talks about a process in relation to setting up a panel. What I'm suggesting here is a different process, which is the process of writing to our aged care recipients and asking them.
Councillor Greco, the advice from the CEO is that it is not an amendment, it is an alternative motion because you are deleting everything in this motion and replacing it with something else. It is not an amendment, it is an alternative motion, which I'm happy for you to foreshadow should this motion fail, but it is not an amendment.
I just don't see how, because there are 2 points which are interrelated points, again, I make the point that what this motion before us says, it talks about a process. I am offering up a different process, which is in the vein of what's been suggested.
Let's go to the mover. Does the mover accept the proposed wording changes?
No.
And the seconder? No. Okay. Is there a seconder for the proposed amendment put forward by Councillor Greco?
I'm happy to second it for the debate.
Councillor Greco, would you like to speak to your amendment?
Yeah, certainly would love to speak to this one. Look, I think what we're doing here is that we're spending what the motion that was there before us was about spending $250,000 on a consultation process. What I'm suggesting in my amendment is that let's talk directly to our aged care recipients. Let's ask them the threshold question of whether they want to see Council continue providing services, or whether they want to, or whether they're not happy with Council providing services. And I think it's a legitimate question that we need to ask. We failed to ask this question over the year where we were consulting with the community, talking to the community, but we never talked about the elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room was, does the community want the Council to continue to provide those services? We also even spent $70,000 in relation to our previous process that brought us nowhere. And now we're going to be spending another $250,000, and I'm not sure where that's going to take us. So I think it's incumbent on us as a council to talk to people who are directly affected by the decisions and the services that they receive. We should not be going out to expensive consultants, expensive panelists to actually make a decision on behalf or come with recommendations on behalf of people of our aging community. I think we should have a great trust and a great respect, particularly for the Active Ageing and Healthy Board and members, which is our own advisory committee, who have also indicated that it's a waste of money going down the path of spending $250,000. And also, I think we should pay greater respect and understanding to appreciating what the views of our ageing community is. So that's why I think we could simply, all that it will cost is an envelope and a stamp where we send out letters to our ageing community and ask them to actually comment on and provide us a sense of direction in whether they want council to remain in providing quality aged care services or whether they want council to jump out of providing aged care services. This, again, is a threshold question that needs to be answered before we actually go about doing further consultation in relation to how we can best deliver those services. So what I'm putting forward is cost effective. It only costs a couple of $1,000 and it will give us a clear direction from the community which way they want to go.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Councillor Williams.
I'll keep it very simple. As Councillor Greco has already mentioned, that I think we need to involve the people who are directly affected by this. And it's important that if we as councillors who are going to possibly make the biggest decision in all our time being on council, I think it's important that we are informed with the most amount of information and options available before making such a decision.
Thank you. Is there any other speakers? Councillor McCarthy.
I'm going to just pick up the point that...
just turn your microphone on.
Just pick up the point that Councillor Williams just raised there, which I think is a really important point. We need to proceed with the most information we can have available to get this right.
Can you just pick up your microphone so we can hear you?
Councillor Williams just made the point to say that we need to make this decision with as much information, and I don't want to misquote, but with as much information as we can get. And what I'm very concerned about with this, and it's not an amendment, it's an alternative motion, is that it is asking people one question. One question that is going to take us down the path of potentially putting at risk, and I'll make that point again, how we can direct what is currently $6 million of council investment and which the review, as proposed, would commit to continuing maintaining that investment in aged care services. This is an important point. Now, if we are to go down the path of asking people simply one question, and that's all we do, and the federal government makes the decision that it may very well make in relation to competition policy as we head over the next couple of years and its application in this sort of service, then we run the risk of actually having an inability to subsidise services in the way that we currently do. That's deeply problematic. I want to know from current recipients of council services and future recipients of council services, what is it that they want and need? The alternative doesn't go down that path at all. So let's get serious, councillors. We need to get this right. Councillor Rennie has already talked about the $130 million potentially over the next 20 years, I think it is, of investment.
10 seconds.
It's a lot of money, and I don't think that the proposed investment for this study is a bad spend when you consider getting this right for the next 2 decades.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers to the amendment? Councillor Amir.
I feel quite upset. When I look at this, what I see is a question similar to contacting everyone in Darebin and asking, do you want footpaths? And do you want council to provide footpaths? Because, of course, if you ask that question, they'll say yes. And of course, if you ask this question, people will say yes. I don't think there's anyone around here who doesn't understand that services are crucially important for older people, and that the quality of those services is crucially important. But by asking this question, we don't get the answer to the question, the information that we really need. So rather than asking, do you want footpaths, it's better to ask, where are you most likely to walk? Where are the bumps in the footpaths that you're at risk of tripping over? Where is there not a footpath yet, where there could be, that will help you to get to where you need to go more quickly? And those exploratory questions are the kinds of questions we should be asking and that will be uncovered, rather than these simplistic questions that is a waste of $3,000 that tells us nothing that we don't already know.
Any other speakers? No, so I'll put that amendment to the vote because there is no right of reply in an amendment. All those in favour and against, that amendment is lost. So we'll go now back to the substantive motion where the mover and seconder has spoken, and I'll ask if there are any other speakers to the substantive motion. Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Melissa Surf. So I'd like to speak in favour of this motion to establish a review panel. I'm really excited about the opportunities that this presents, and I want to say particularly why I have an interest in this area. My mother was a carer with Silver Circle before she retired, so she did the sort of work that Darebin provides, showering, cleaning, looking after people in their homes. And with my father, I saw him going from being an active senior, playing tennis, treasurer at his church, to going into a nursing home. And I was very fortunate that my family could help him get into a good nursing home and get the care that he needed. And I want every person ageing in Darebin to be looked after as well as my dad was. That's why I chose to be on the Healthy and Active Ageing Board. And I think with the changes that we have now, we just need to work out what Darebin's best role to do this is into the future. And as some of the commenters said before, I think there might be a role for a broker, a one-stop shop that people talked about. That came out in our first consultation. And in terms of the people who said that we should just get the officers to do it, the officers have recommended what we have on the table. We've been working with Shadi and his team over the last year on a working group to talk about these changes, and we know how big this is. As I said before, we know that this is one of the biggest decisions that we're going to make on our whole council term. I think that spending $250,000 is warranted when we're talking about such a big decision. In response to Councillor Greco's comment that we need to make a values-based decision, I think we are making a values-based decision, and I think we also need to make an evidence-based decision, and I don't think those things are either or. The principles of our studies say that we're committed to an age-friendly city which values, supports and empowers older people so they can live well, be healthy, socially connected and live independently. That's what we're working towards. We can be values-based and evidence-based. They're not contradictory. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further speakers? Councillor Greco.
I have a second amendment that I would like to put forward.
Sure. Read it out.
I'll read out the amendment that under the principles, which are part of the terms of reference in regards to the setting up a panel, that include an additional principle number 10, the council is committed to open and transparent decision-making processes and will therefore bring any recommendations emanating from the review process back to an open council meeting for a decision by councillors.
Okay, so the proposal is to amend the terms of reference to add an additional point to the principles for conducting the review, which is on page 4, just above, would go just above the scope. Would you like to hear those words again? Okay, can I just have those? Yep. And then we'll get them up on screen. Council is committed to open and transparent decision-making processes and will therefore bring any recommendations emanating from the review process back to an open council meeting for a decision by councillors. Is the mover happy to accept that change to the terms of reference?
I'm happy to accept that.
Okay, so that's been accepted. Yep, that's been accepted by the mover and seconder, so will be accepted into the terms of reference. Is there any? Would you like to speak to the motion now?
Yeah, I would like to speak against the motion, and I'm encouraged. I'm encouraged by the mover and the seconder accepting that slight change. Look, councillors, when we, and why I'm speaking against this, because councillors, we are spending $250,000. Councillors, there's nothing stopping, from what I've heard, there is, notwithstanding the changes that are occurring at a federal level, councillors, there is nothing stopping council from saying that it will continue to maintain and be a service provider in the delivery of aged care services. Nothing is stopping us doing that. Notwithstanding what Councillor McCarthy is saying, that the changes may inhibit us, there is nothing stopping council to continue to be a service provider. Having said that, and having made that point, then the next point that we have to move to is that whether we as a council are principled enough to say that we will continue to provide aged care services to our community. That does not necessarily mean, councillors, that we're fixed to providing the exact services that we provide now. Those services could change, but those services can change within an in-house servicing model. That's what we're talking about, councillors. We're not talking about whether the service will change or not. Of course, in 20 years' time, services will change. But what we're talking about is that, do we do this in relation to an in-house model, or do we do this in relation to an outsourced or in a privatised manner? I believe, and I think again it's a value-based decision, like we make many value-based decisions here on council. We make value-based decisions about gambling. And the inappropriateness of pokers. We make value-based decisions in relation to how we deal with issues in regards to the environment. We don't leave the issues of the environment to the market. We intervene as a council and we invest heavily. We invest heavily, particularly with our solar panels, where we're putting over $5 million of council money up front to purchase solar panels. I've got no problem with that. I voted for that. I was supportive of that. That's how we intervene as a council. Why can't we intervene in relation to aged care services? We also intervene in relation to providing, in relation to our cats and dogs. We built, together with other councils, a $6 million hotel for our cats and dogs to be housed. Now, we service our cats and dogs, and we're okay about that, and I'm all in favour for that. But when it comes to the age, we need to get evidence, we need to do this, and we need to do that, and we shy away from that. Councillors, it's a very simple decision that needs to be made. And I don't want to sound like a broken record, because and I think it's naive, Councillor Rennie, to think that this is not a debate, introducing the issue of privatisation. This is a debate about privatisation, Councillor Rennie, because the impetus from the federal government is all designed around ensuring that they prosecute the privatisation of human services.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Sorry, I should have cut you off because you actually got 3 minutes then instead of 2. Is there any other speakers? Councillor McCarthy.
Look, I'm really struck listening to the debate by councillors about how it feels like we're not even talking about the same thing. Let's be really clear, and I just would draw councillors' attention back to page 8, which outlines, and page 9, which outlines the principles for conducting this review. These principles are about values. They're about the things that we have been talking about. They are a commitment by this council to a process because we value aged care and older people so highly. If it was up to me, and I'm going to go quite radical on this, if it was up to me right now, if the biggest impediment was the federal legislation and federal government preventing us from being able to continue to be the sole provider of aged care services in the way that we have been in years gone, then I'd be looking for us to be moving to a model where it's a worker-controlled model, where we actually put the older people who are clients of aged care services and the people who deliver those services, the workers themselves, in the driving seat, and remove the bureaucrats and the private enterprise opportunities. That we move to a model that has been adopted in other countries quite successfully and provides a level of sustainability over time that means that not a skerrick of money is wasted on bureaucracy, and the money instead is invested as much as possible in the highest quality services to the most vulnerable people. I would love to see us go down that path if we can't continue to be the sole provider of many of the aged care services that we've spoken about tonight. Because at the end of the day, it's about maximising the amount of funding in this area to services for older people, the services they so desperately need, want and deserve. That is what is up for debate here tonight. It is not a debate between public control and privatisation, and I find it abhorrent that it has been framed in that way.
10 seconds.
And I would say, make the point again, the only way we will get to those models is actually to have a respectful and considered conversation with our community that is inclusive. It is so important that we do this right.
Thank you.
Other councils are walking away from these services, and we are saying, no, we are going to fight for these services. We're just not sure
Thanks,
what they're going to
Councillor
look like
McCarthy.
yet.
That's time. Are there any further speakers? No? Pardon? Councillor Williams hasn't. So if there's no further speakers, I will put that to the vote. All those in favour and against, that motion is carried. Yep, we will just get Councillor Messina to rejoin us now. We'll just wait a moment for those exiting the chamber to leave before we move on to the next item. Okay, item 8.2, third quarter council plan progress report. That's moved by Councillor Amir. Is there a seconder? Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Amir, would you like to speak to the motion?
It's hard to get out of the aged care frame. All right, so this quarterly report is the third one reporting on the council plan, which we implemented in the middle of last year. So the progress reports is reporting on the big actions as well as some of the smaller actions that we said that we would do in the first year of the council plan. And what we can see here in this report is that most of the things, not all of the things, but most of the things that we set out to do, we're on track to deliver as expected. So that includes doubling of solar power, creating the Darebin Energy Foundation, dramatically improving walking and cycling, establishing the Nature Trust, the redevelopment of the Ruthven Primary site, which is exciting, working towards renewing Northcote Pool, which we'll be making some big decisions on in the coming months, reinvigoration of the Darebin Arts and Entertainment Centre, with, again, a lot more to come. We exceeded our targets in increasing the tree canopy, the target of over 1,900 trees, and also we're on track to deliver our to keep planning for the new suburb around Northland, where there was community consultation happening in recent weeks. It's really exciting to see all the work that we put in the first 9 months on council, or 8 months from when we got elected in November through to June, trying to figure out what are the most important things for this council, and then putting a line under, of course, knowing that we can't do everything, coming up with those really big actions and then seeing them being put into practice. So, of course, in a lot of these cases, we are in the early stages, the planning stages, but some of the implementation has already started happening. The trees are in the ground, the solar panels are going up in a couple of months. So I'd like to say thank you to all the staff who've been working very hard to make all of this happen. As everyone knows, Darebin's been undergoing organisational restructure, so to continue to deliver at such a high level when we've had so much change in the organisation is really to be commended. So thank you so much to Sue and team.
Thank you, Councillor Amir. Councillor McCarthy.
I don't have a great deal to add to Councillor Amir's great coverage, other than to make the point that this is actually a pretty new thing for us. We haven't had annual action plans in this council in previous terms, and therefore we haven't had the level of reporting that you see in this document on such a regular basis. And I make that point because I think it's It's evidence of the commitment that we made when we adopted the council plan last year, which was to say this is not something that is adopted tonight and sits on a shelf. This is something which will continually be brought in here, into this chamber, reviewed, challenged, questioned, and of course measured in terms of our progress against it. So I just want to thank all the officers, the community members, the organisations that council works with, including our loved neighbourhood houses, who do an extraordinary amount of work in the community in terms of delivering on these things with us. And I just want to make the point as well that the council is not just the councillors and the council staff. It is a network of over 100 services and dozens of organisations, including community groups. And when we get up here and make a progress report on this work, it's not necessarily just the progress of the organisation, it's actually the progress of everyone that makes this place a great place to live. And I'd like to thank everyone for their contribution to the co-delivery of this plan.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Messina.
Thank you. I just want to echo what Councillor Amir and Councillor McCarthy stated. And I note that this is a third quarter action progress report. It is a requirement that we receive updates, and any business plan requires a progress report. It's a measure of what we're collectively at and what we set out to achieve. Out of the 16 action plans, oh, you can't hear me?
Just hold it up a little bit.
Oh, okay. All right, okay. Out of the 16 big action plans, 11 are on target. I'd like to see item number 9, re-image and revitalise the Seniors Club. Number 13, create a developers contribution scheme. Number 15, we await the state government with the Bell Street, Preston and High Street Reservoir. And one that I'm fiercely passionate about, developing a plan for the revitalisation of Preston Central. These are categorised as yellow and falling behind. I look forward to and welcome the day that they are completed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Messina. Further speakers? No? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Motion is carried. Item 8.3, Financial Report, 9 months ended 31st of March 2018. Moved by Councillor Amir, seconded by Councillor Rennie. Councillor Amir.
So the budget, of course, goes with the action plan. This is the financial side of things. So the council has achieved a year-to-date operating surplus of $45.2 million, which is $6.3 million ahead of the budget. So what we see here is that we're mostly on track. There's been some delays in capital works. A few reasons for this, partly the organisational restructure we talked about before, and also what we've realised as councillors over the last 6 months or so was the enthusiasm of our first few months on council. While great to have so many things started, we were also perhaps bitten off a bit more than we can chew. So that is definitely a learning for me, and I'm sure others. And in the budget that will be coming to this chamber in the coming weeks for 18-19, that's certainly a lesson that I and I'm sure others have learnt. And we've been really conscious, working very hard, having very long discussions over many hours about not just the money but the prioritisation of what can be done within the organisation, what's realistic, and how can we make sure that not only do we have really strong and ambitious plans, but we commit to things that we can deliver to stay fully on track across the whole organisation.
Thank you. Councillor Rennie.
I'll keep it brief because I think Councillor Amir has done an excellent job in giving an overview of where things are at. I might just comment briefly on the capital expenditure program, noting that at this point we are $17.93 million behind in that program, but we have actually, we're $15.82 million behind in the year-to-date budget, but we have committed a further $13.2 million already by way of issued purchase orders. And what that means is that although we appear to be significantly behind at this point, we are looking at an end-of-year position which is only $1.13 million away from the actual budget. So these sort of figures that you get 3/4 of the way through the year often don't indicate the full picture, and we're likely to be very close to our budgeted position by the end of the financial year.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers? No, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. 8.4 is the Mayor Montreal visit. I will declare an interest for this item as I have an indirect conflict due to a conflicting duty. And I'll pass the chairing over to the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Messina.
Item number 8.4, the Mayor's Montreal visit. We have before us an officer's recommendation, and I want to alert councillors to the Councillor Support and Expense Policy. I trust you've all read that. Do we have any questions, councillors, in relation to the motion? No? Do we have a mover or a seconder to the motion? Councillor Rennie?
Happy to move the motion.
A seconder? Councillor McCarthy. Would you like to speak to the motion, Councillor Rennie?
Yes, thank you. I think it's a great honour, in fact, that our Mayor has been invited to go over to Montreal to participate in this Congress. And I note also that there is no cost to Council in terms of her participation, because that has been supported by the conference organisers, and the Mayor herself will be paying for additional accommodation and airfares. I think being represented at an international conference like this reflects very well on our whole council and on the work that we do, noting that Councillor Le Cerf has brought significant expertise to Darebin Council in this space as a result of it being the field that she works in. So I think this is a win for all of Council. I think it's great for our profile. I think it provides an opportunity to share some of the work that we're doing, but also to learn about the work that others are doing. And in that way, I think there's significant value add that will come back to Darebin from our Mayor having the opportunity to meet with her peers and colleagues and leaders from around the world. So I do think it's a great opportunity, and I look forward to hearing from her on her return all the learnings that we might be able to put into place here.
Thank you. Councillor McCarthy.
I'd like to second Councillor Rennie's comments, and I would just reinforce that this opportunity is something which is pretty rare and unique, and I'm not sure if councillors are aware, but it is mentioned in the report, but our Mayor is currently, in fact, the chair of the Regional Executive for the International Cities for Local Environmental Initiatives, which is a significant role in terms of local government, because it's a leadership role, but it also demonstrates how significant Darebin's work is in the climate space and the environmental space, and how significant it's taken, not just here in Australia, but around the world. The fact that Councillor Le Cerf, as the Mayor, has chosen to attend and intends to attend at her own expense, I think says a lot about her own personal investment in this particular area of policy, and her generosity in terms of that commitment. So I think she's to be commended for taking up this opportunity, but I think also it's another way of putting Darebin on the map at both the not only the national level but also the global level. And it's no great surprise that Los Angeles Council has recently adopted a policy setting very similar to what we adopted, and that's great to see one of the biggest economies in the world actually following our lead, and the sixth biggest economy apparently in the US, really driving that sort of policy agenda off the back of what we do here in little old Darebin. So congratulations to our Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Any further speakers? Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Messina. So I just really want to commend Mayor Le Cerf for the opportunity to go to this conference. I think that there really couldn't be a better person placed to do it. I think that Mayor Le Cerf has led us through putting a climate emergency frame on everything that we do, and I think having the opportunity to share that at a world level is really amazing. And just a little tidbit from my day today, I went to a conference, and when someone heard that I was from Darebin, they gave me a big hug to say thank you for our climate emergency framework, and I'd really like to sort of pass that hug on to Mayor Le Cerf and really wish her well at her time at the conference.
Thank you, Councillor Newton. Any further speakers? We shall put that to the vote. All in favour? That motion is carried. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move now to item 8.5, the proposed road discontinuance adjoining the rear of 66 Station Street, Fairfield. That's moved by Councillor McCarthy. Seconded by Councillor Rennie. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor. Just switch that on. This is a fairly standard item that we have in our agenda from time to time, which is a road discontinuance proposal. And the recommendation, as councillors would see, is to commence the statutory procedures to discontinue this road in Station Street, Fairfield. There are some particular elements to this which councillors would see from the report, including the proposal to sell the road to an adjoining property owner, in this case, by private treaty, and to transfer the land to any land not sold to the adjoining property owners. So sometimes these things are cut and dry and it's one property owner that purchases the whole thing, and other times there's a little bit of negotiation that's involved in this case. There's a little bit of nuance there. In terms of the consultation process, all those sorts of things are covered in the report, and thank you to the officers for their work on this regard.
Thank you. Councillor Rennie?
Nothing to add.
Any further speakers? No, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Motion is carried. Item 8.6, proposed sale of land from a discontinued road adjoining 146 Elizabeth Street, 19 Furzer Street and 74 McNamara Street, Preston. Moved by Councillor Williams, seconded by Councillor Amir. Councillor Williams.
Just like the previous agenda item, Council commences the statutory process under the Section 189 of the Local Government Act 1989 for the sale of land of the discontinued road adjoining the rear of 146 Elizabeth Street, 19 Furzer Street and 74 McNamara Street in Preston. All immediate adjoining owners were consulted regarding the proposal and no objections were received. The owners of Elizabeth Street and Furzer Street of Preston have agreed in principle to purchase the land at the rear of the property at the current market value, as well as meeting the all reasonable cost associated with the statutory process.
Thank you. Councillor Amir.
So the land here between the three properties is enclosed by the current private property, so there's no public access, so it absolutely makes sense for council to sell this land, and it's good to see this moving forward with the adjoining property owners.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Motion is carried. Item 8.7? Yeah, okay. Item 8.7, CT 2015-04, Building Trade Maintenance Plumbing. Moved by Councillor McCarthy and seconded by Councillor Amir. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you. Councillors, as you'd note, this item refers to seeking our approval for the extension of a contract for building trade maintenance, in this case plumbing. It is a significant contract. I just draw to councillors' attention it is for the next 5 years and with options to extend as well. The total value of the contract, as per the recommendation, is almost $5.5 million, so $5,380,000, including GST, which covers the full 5-year term. Obviously, council undertakes a range of plumbing-related works from time to time across the city, and we need to have a provider in that sense as well. So I don't have any concerns at all with the report. I would just make the point again, which I've made before, which is that this is a relatively new thing in this chamber for us to have these sorts of contracts actually dealt with in open business, something that I greatly welcome, and I think it's good for all residents to understand and to see openly and transparently in the agenda and in the minutes what things cost to do across this city, and the process through which council goes in appointing contractors, in this case, to deliver those works.
Thank you. Councillor Amir. Any further speakers? No. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Motion's carried. Item 9 is consideration of responses to petitions, notices of motion and general business. There is none. And now we've had the procedural motion that brings forward item 14, which is the consideration of reports considered confidential. 14.1, Preston Market has been designated confidential and as earlier clarified pursuant to sections 89 to F and H, which relates to legal advice and not prejudicing future decisions of the council. So is there a motion to move into camera? That's moved by Councillor Messina.
So just to understand this, so we're moving into I would just like to bring up a procedural motion.
Yes.
In that in that, and I'm not sure what stage to do it, so I seek some guidance from yourself or from officers, is that in relation to the item that we're going to be considering in confidential, I would like to move a motion that we do not consider that motion as a confidential motion, and that we consider it in an open forum.
So I think that the trigger for that is whether the decision to go into camera or not, it passes. So Councillor Messina just moved a motion to consider this item in camera. Yes, and we'll take a vote on whether we do that or not.
But my understanding is that we ought to have the debate in the open about whether we should go into camera or not go into camera before we actually go into camera. And I would like to move a procedural motion that, and I'll explain. I'll also explain how we can get around the issue
We'll just
of
go
legal
through
advice.
the local laws and just see if there's anything that can provide further guidance. Okay, so we had a procedural motion that was moved by Councillor Messina, so we have to deal with that procedural motion first, and then we can deal with yours. There is obviously the option to consider how you vote for Councillor Messina's procedural motion.
Sorry, Mayor,
Councillor Messina has already moved a motion. We have to deal with that motion first before we can deal with any other motions. You are foreshadowing another procedural motion, which we can deal with after we've dealt with Councillor Messina's.
Yeah, but Mayor, if I may put it to you this way, is that...
There's a procedural motion is before us. We have to deal with them in order that they're put before us, and Councillor Messina has already raised her hand to move this procedural motion.
So, Mayor, as a point of order, then, if I may, is that I'm seeking your discretion that we and I'm asking also Councillor Messina whether she would withdraw her procedural motion to consider my procedural motion, so that we could have an open.
Sorry, you're getting into a debate now about procedural motions. Councillor Messina, do you want to withdraw your procedural motion or not? No. So the procedural motion that we're dealing with now is to move in camera to consider the 14.1 Preston Market. Is there a seconder for that procedural motion? That's seconded by Councillor Newton. All those in favour? And against? That motion is carried. So we have now voted to move into committee, where we will consider a confidential item, and we will let you know once we have finalised that decision or that item, and we'll invite you back in after that.